Alright guys. Thanks for coming everyone. Sorry, I'm not the thanks everyone for coming to another Transhumanism Sydney event. It's been a while since the Singularity U back in, last month? We had the last one probably in August, so it's good to get everyone back again. Today we have a very special guest, Barton. Who's Sam Barton has been, I think, with Transhumanism Sydney since 2015. I remember seeing him first in a Google Plus hangout when we were first reaching out to see if anyone's interested in the future of humanity. And people Sam Barton came in and said hi. And Shanti, thanks again for the Future Factory and hosting us today. Look around, it's an amazing place to be for anything hackerspace and building the future together. And with nothing said and do, Sam's going to be talking about the global citizenship and the transhuman era. Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause.
Hey everyone, I'm Sam. Thank you for being here. Today I want to talk about possibility. I want to talk about the potential power that all of us have, those of us in this room and those of us around the world. And I want to talk about the power that we have to, basically the potential that we have to go out into the world and to shape it into something that works for the planet and for all of those who call it home. So I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, and then we'll go to Q&A, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions, because there's a bit of content to get through, and it's a little bit out of sorts, a little bit different. So today we're going to talk about global citizenship. But before we get into that, I just want to outline where we are today and how did we get here. So we're currently faced with an array of global challenges, the likes of which humanity has never faced before. These include the collapse of the biosphere, climate change, pandemics, antibiotic resistance, the ever-present threat of nuclear war, ocean acidification. The list continues, and it's exhaustive. There's one that I'd like to draw all of your attention to, though, and that's the collapse of the biosphere.
Sorry. Hey.
We're having technical difficulties.
Sorry. Yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me on the back? Awesome. So yes, there's one challenge in particular that I'd like to bring your attention to, and I think it's one that doesn't get as much attention as it really should, but it is beginning to, and that's, like I said, the collapse of the biosphere. So the biosphere is the sum total of all ecosystems on Earth, and it is currently experiencing a tremendous decline. As anyone who's watched a nature documentary recently probably have. But just some stats. I spoke to a researcher at the University of Sydney recently about one of his papers on insect population decline, and he reviewed 72, I think, papers around the world about insect population declines, and he has found that, or basically 40% of insect species are thought to be threatened with extinction. And this is a big deal because 75% of our crops are pollinated by insect species, and a huge number of animals out there require insects to survive. And because of that, 50% of species may become extinct by the end of the century. So just for context, 60% of terrestrial vertebrates depend on insects for food, 60% of birds, all amphibians are insectivores, and 9% of lizards. So if you like the natural world and you enjoy watching these nature documentaries and just reveling in the beauty of the diversity of life that we have on this planet, this should be a huge concern. But more than that, insects are inextricable parts of our ecosystem.
Sorry.
No. Oh really?
Oh yeah, the fancy.
Can you face it this way? Warming.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Alrighty. At the back? Yep. So insects are inextricable parts of our ecosystems, and they do a lot of work for us. They recycle waste, they obviously feed a lot of crops, and if they go, it will spell disaster. According to Francisco Bayo, we are experiencing the 6th mass extinction on Earth. If we destroy the basis of the ecosystem, which are insects, then we destroy all other animals that rely on them for a food source. It will collapse altogether, and that's why we think it's not dramatic, it's a reality. So, we are faced with the collapse of natural systems that have supported life on Earth for millions and millions of years. And we are inextricably connected to the natural world. If it collapses, we may follow. And a lot of it is our fault because of farming practices and climate change, among other things, that are outlined in his work, among others. So there are the environmental costs, which are obviously huge. There will also be tremendous human costs as well. At the moment, there are about 70 million people that are displaced around the world, and this is for various issues: resource scarcity, which has triggered civil wars, climate change, and according to the International Organization for Migration, by 2050, between 25 million and 1.5 billion more people will have to leave their homes because of issues of climate change and resource scarcity. And that's a huge amount. That's a huge amount of people. There are also going to be more people on the planet. By 2050, we're looking at about 9.8 billion people on planet Earth. And given that we're experiencing ecosystem collapse, more and more mouths to feed, it's not exactly obvious how we're going to be able to provide food for everyone and access to water, given, well, the ravages of climate change. The world is already struggling to deal with the current migration crisis, so how will we deal with one that's orders of magnitude greater than one that we're experiencing at the moment? And this isn't a problem to come. These global challenges are ones that we're already facing at the moment. The burden of global problems is already too great for lone countries. One example of this is the island of Kiribati out in the Pacific Islands. They recently, I think last year, had to buy land 2,000 kilometers away from them to ensure their nation's food security. And it's likely to be one of the first nations wiped off the planet due to sea level rise. Now, this is an example of a solitary nation state basically not being able to deal with the burden of global crises. And this is one of many, 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 many stories, and stories to come. So these problems require global coordination and action at the global level, and it's not happening, as we are all undoubtedly aware. So how did we get here? What were the chain of events, or what were the institutions that brought us to this point? I think in part it started with the Treaty of Westphalia, the creation of the institution of the country. So countries are the primary institutions. Sorry, I'm just parched.
Hot.
Countries are the primary institutions we human beings use to deal with the complexities of the modern world, and they've existed since about the 17th century. In 1648, a number of treaties were signed, which were called the Peace of Westphalia, and they brought to an So one of the reasons why I'm actually coughing is because of the ravages of climate change. Have you all experienced the haze out there?
Yeah.
It's wreaking havoc on my lungs.
Smoking.
So these series of treaties, the treaties of Westphalia, brought to end a number of wars, and wars which actually caused the death of about 8 million people, which at the time was about 1% of the population. And It's been pointed to as like the birth of sovereignty, because what the treaties did was basically say, instead of all the infighting, the treaty stipulated that the countries or the regions would respect each other's territory boundaries and would not interfere. So this is known as Westphalian sovereignty, and has been pointed to by legal scholars as like the basis for the international system which we currently live in. Now, sovereignty is the supreme authority of a state over a given territory, free from external influences. And as I said before, sovereign states are the social institutions that we use currently to deal with the complexity of the world, and they have been vehicles of progress and human development. They've funded amazing scientific progress and have delivered human rights to billions of people around the world. So, countries are there to be celebrated, and we all have a deep connection to our countries. They also have a duty to their citizens, which is important to remember. But unfortunately, sovereignty is not without its problems. Sovereign states have to put their interests above global interests and human rights, and they do so. The principle of non-interference, which I mentioned earlier, no longer holds today because of the global challenges which we face. Local actions can now have global consequences. And as we'll get to shortly, and we're all, I'm sure, aware that sovereign states have hamstrung efforts to promote necessary change in the world. And these countries, they need to exist. By definition, sovereign states want to exist in perpetuity. They, like the US or China or Australia, they don't want to wind down operations because something better comes along. That's not how they operate. They're like companies or people. And actually, they are people in a legal sense. So the highest level of social organization you can think of is the UN Security Council. And it's made up of 15 members, 5 of which are permanent. And the permanent members are China, Russia, UK, France, and the US. And each of them have veto power, which means that if there's a resolution that's going around that's substantive, they can just cancel it. So what's happening is that because these countries are vying for national interests alone, they're putting their interests above everyone else's. They are hamstringing efforts for positive global change that we need. So the existing institutions that govern the lives of all of us, not just in Australia but globally, are not doing the job. So what do we do? What now? We touched on the scale of the problem and the costs. We've briefly explored the way the current game is set up and how it's been built and what's wrong with it. So what I'm going to outline now is an idea for what not a solution, but a transition, what transition could look like. How we may be able to move beyond the nation state stalemate and catalyze global action. And I think that's global citizenship. So the idea is roughly this. We create a country because we can. And we open it up to everyone, whoever wants to join. If you don't want to join, that's fine. But I'm sure there may be some people out there who do, perhaps some of you in this room. We use this country as a vehicle to deliver access to basic needs and human rights to citizens around the world, regardless of where they live and where they're from. We use this vehicle as a way to advocate for global interests and to take action towards global interests as well. And importantly, to act as a catalyst for the next step in human socio-political innovation that we so desperately need. But most importantly, I think that it could change the way we see the world. And ideas run everything. Like we all live in everything that we do is a story, and like the story of the country is just one of the things that go in our lives. Something like this is similar enough that people would accept it, but would also cause them to question why national boundaries are actually the determining factor in so much of life, and whether or not that should be the case, and if not, what then? So, why a country? It's a pretty good question. One is that they are the vehicle through which we conduct global affairs currently. Also, to try and change the game, the system, whatever you want to call it, you have to sometimes play by the rules, at least initially. It's less costly. Countries also make sense to people. Like, it's not a radically new social institution that would be created. It's very, very familiar. An important point is it's possible. I know this sounds like madness, but it's actually possible. Another reason is recognition. Not recognition of the country itself, but of its citizens, which I will explain why that's important very soon. And most importantly, this could be a way to subsume the existing system in a positive and in a positive way that's not entirely destructive, which is something that I think we really need right now, because the costs, as we've explored, are quite high. So recognition. Over 1 billion people in the world don't have proof of identity, which means they cannot prove who they are. So they don't have a passport or a driver's license or a birth certificate. They are effectively invisible. And without identity, you can't, or you can struggle to get access to basic services like education, healthcare, the ability to vote. It's portal to it's a portal to the world. There's also 10 million people out there who are stateless, which means that they do not belong to any country whatsoever. No one is there advocating, well, there are people advocating for their interests, but they are still, they're multinational organizations, UN organizations that are still hamstrung by nation states. By creating a country, we can extend our hand and recognizing these people as global citizens if they so wish. We can extend our hand across borders and recognize them as fellow citizens, and we then will have a moral obligation to provide for them, and we will be duty bound. And I think that's quite powerful. Another aspect which I think is rather exciting is the need for global internet access and device ownership. Like this, even though I'm talking about creating a country, I don't mean a country where I just want to, I guess, really highlight this. I don't think we can. It's not about creating a country and land where everyone can come in and live and get together and sing kumbaya. That's not what I'm talking about. It's a digital country. Now, the internet is the backbone of the 21st century society. We cannot engage with the world as it is without the internet. It's also necessary for the securing of human rights. The internet is necessary for freedom of expression, the right to education, freedom of public assembly. The internet is necessary to be a human being today. And it also enables access to basic services, like the ability, like messaging, email, banking, and also, as I'm sure many of us, the transhumanists in this room are aware, cutting-edge services. Like I can now open up my phone and get access to supercomputers, the likes of which could only be imagined 50 years ago. And there's this whole slew of incredible internet-connected technologies that we can get access to through our own personal portals, our smartphones. So a critical component of a digital global citizenship is, well, ensuring that people can get access to the internet, because it's through the internet that these services and these services will be, and recognition will be provided to people. How this can be done is there to be explored. There are obviously companies working out there, like SpaceX and OneWeb, on developing satellites, internet for the world, which is a wonderful thing, but leaving something as important to democracy and society as the internet to private companies is a cause of concern, especially because they are within existing nation states and they have to listen to the laws and all that. So we need to kind of move away from that. Internet access is also the ultimate tool for combating inequality in the world. What I mean by inequality is not so much wealth inequality, how much money you have, but opportunity inequality, like what you can do and be in the world. It turns out that where you're born matters most for the opportunities that you're afforded in life. And when you get access to the internet, you get access to the library of the world. You've got the wealth of humanity at your fingertips. And it's a key that if you've got a sufficient level of basic resources, you can unlock so many doors. You can learn whatever you want. You can develop skills which then you can market on in the global marketplace and receive an income. It is the ultimate liberator. And device ownership is necessary to securing these outcomes. So one of the parts of this, if it were to come to be, would be the provisioning of smartphones for citizens. And smartphones are like 20 to 40 bucks nowadays. So like, if you think about this as like an individual tool that can dramatically reduce inequality in the world, like the investment is like, it's worth it. So yeah, the internet is humanity digitized, it's the library of the world, and it really should be treated as such. Another component or rationale for this is the need for global wealth redistribution. And this could be a vehicle for that. There are very strong philosophical justifications for global wealth redistribution. I'll talk more about them at the end if you're all curious. But just to touch on them, countries aren't responsible for the wealth that they generate because of things like natural, just like the luck of the natural or mineral wealth or the natural lottery. There's this notion of egoistic altruism, which is by redistributing wealth, by giving stuff to those who need it most, we'll end up benefiting from how they use those resources. Because if we educate some people in poor countries or whatever, and they take actions which end up curing cancer or doing something of that nature, we end up benefiting. We can't measure these things so much, but they do happen. And in terms of combating climate change and the plastic crisis and all that, it turns out, I don't have the link up there, I don't have the source, but it turns out that people care a lot more about the environment when they've got food and when they've got their basic needs taken care of. Like, you're not going to convince a village in India to recycle when they're trying to get clean water and food. So economic development results in increased care for the environment. Another important aspect of wealth redistribution here is the allocation of funds to grassroots collectives and movements around the world, which I'm going to talk about now. So we've covered the global problems and like the need for the global internet access and all that, but global problems result from local actions. In order to tackle what's going on up here, we need to fix what's going on in our backyards. And that means we need local communities, like people, like all of us here, we need to come together around the world, but in our local communities, and take responsibility for what's going on in our backyards, and to take local actions in alignment with global goals. Because if we don't do what's going on here, if we don't fix the local problems, the global problems won't be fixed either. So we have a responsibility to go out, come together, and fix what's going on. We need to come together and actually talk to each other rather than just like walk past each other in hallways.
Yeah.
Because I know we all do that here. Sydney's terrible for it.
Yeah.
I love Sydney. Just moved here, but it's great.
But it's also shit. Like, people are shit to each other here. Like,
Yeah. People are a bit more cold.
A lot of big cities are like that.
Yeah. Well, there's just too many people to say hello to. And this action would be in alignment with some globally crowdsourced framework. I just want to stress that this idea, it's not about replacing existing not-for-profits or whatever, because there are so many people out there doing amazing work. This is more so this would weave them together, provide them with funding and resources and resources to take it to empower the people who do what they do best better, or to do what they do best, because a lot of people out there, they really lack substantial funding. So why now? Necessity. The human and environmental costs are far too high. We have been gifted and cursed with the responsibilities of being custodians of this planet. We are the only life in the universe that we know of, and right now it's going to shit. And I think that we are cosmically significant, because if we are the only glimpse of consciousness and life on the planet, then we have, as human beings, given that we have power in our hands, we have a responsibility to take action and to preserve life and to also see the rest of the universe, just because we've got all our eggs in one basket at the moment. We also have the tools, which is really great. It's quite amazing how technology has developed and these challenges have come together, and like we now have the tools to tackle these things. We couldn't do this 5-10 years ago. I mean, blockchain just come into the world. With distributed ledger technologies like blockchain, mesh networks, and the array of internet-connected technologies, they can enable us to actually create the system that we need to enact this sort of change. And the beautiful thing is, the nature of these technologies means that no country or institution can shut them down. I invite anyone here to try and take blockchain, to take Bitcoin offline. You're just not going to do it. We have the potential to create systems that no one can interfere with, and that's remarkable. So we don't need the seal of approval from the United Nations to do something like this. All it takes is citizens. Yeah, one moment.
Okay, I just want to counter that.
Yeah. No worries, please.
I disagree with that because still following the 2,500 years of hegemonic framework, especially. So they're following the two-tier system where China, they're following the two-tier system of China and America, and they're controlling the digital intelligence of this, and it's not inclusive of all 195 states. So if you want to make it democratic and inclusive, you have to intertwine 7 million people in the conversation.
Yeah.
And you've got to think about plural economics. So every community will be different, and they might apply different plural economic theories to their, depending upon their cultural status of need.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that,
Yeah, I just want to get out of that linear sort of thought pattern.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with any of that. I think we would like to clarify that later. So we have the tools. It's possible, and no one can take it offline. And I believe that we have the global political will. Every time I open up my Facebook, or I go on Twitter, or I go on the internet, go on Reddit, I just see widespread concern for more things than I would like to even conceive of, or that I actually can conceive of. And there's this feeling that I know that we all have, that things aren't going so well, and that because we're connected to the internet, we know that there's this feeling that we can tap into. So I believe that we have the global political will. And it's important for the transhumanists here as well, because the transhuman future, which we all envision, will not happen if we don't get our shit together and sort this out. If we want to live a life among the stars in spaceships, we need to sort out the problems of tomorrow. So I opened up, when you walked in, there was this quote from Barton, which I really like. And I think it really speaks to this, just this idea, which is all it is. It's just an idea. And you never change things by fighting against existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the old model obsolete. And this is how I see this working. The solution that we need is currently unknown. It's there to be imagined and created. And this here is an exercise in co-creation. I don't know. I know some things. I don't know much. Something like this is going to require the coordination and collaboration of millions of people, and some really, really intelligent people scattered across the earth. What I do know is that business as usual is going to result in catastrophe. And it's up to us, citizens of the world, to actually do something about it. So I think that we can create a model that works for all people and for the planet. So, thank you very much.
That was awesome, Sam. I think when we talk about transhumanism, it's all about, well, what about the super well-being? How do we actually have people that not just live longer or more intelligently, but actually cohesively become well together? So,
I think we feel happy when we're around trees. So if we want trees and good life and all that, we've got to preserve that.
Does anyone have any questions for Sam?
Hi Sam, thanks for that. I just wanted to clarify your idea of what you're calling a country. The one you're proposing, the global country or whatever you're calling it, it's without a territory, right? It's a non-territorial country.
Technically, a country has to have three things: territory, a permanent population, and the ability to engage with other governments.
So you're going to have to cede some territory from one country or other.
Yeah, but I think that's possible. I think there's a lot of money out there, and I think there's a lot of people who, with money, who probably, even us, we can crowdsource something like this. So I think that we can find territory. I think we can definitely establish a permanent population. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are like, yeah, let's move here and make this happen.
In that law, is territory defined as physical?
Well, no, so that the
Because
Seasteading
if it's
Institute.
technically not defined as physical, then
lawyers have been asleep at the wheel. It's their own fault.
Yeah, well, we can create a VR world.
No, just like as in, I mean, if you have a space on the internet, I mean, Facebook is what the third biggest country or whatever.
Yeah, platform as territory. Yeah.
It has to be real. It has to be physical.
Well, even so, I think it'd be possible, and there's a lot of people trying to build sea-states, countries, like or cities on the water. So yeah.
Floating island.
Yeah, floating islands. Yeah, I think there's one going on just nearby. Floating islands.
Not sure if floating islands will work, but what about putting landfill or just building an island in somewhere that's shallow in the ocean? Like, does that then becomes classified as an island, and you can now call it as a territory that?
Yeah, I think that's what China's doing at the moment. They're just putting sand in the ocean and calling it land.
So that means you could just do the same thing. Somebody else and just call it a territory.
Yeah. See, I don't think that's a roadblock. I actually don't think actually starting a country is the hard part.
Yeah.
Which sounds ridiculous.
There's a whole stack of in the middle of Australia where nobody, there is not many people there. So you could include them and build Nirvana or.
Yeah, I want to stress this isn't utopia. This isn't utopic thinking. This is practical.
But then also, like, China's actually a really good example. China, there is a significant percentage of the population that doesn't live in China. So you would have your sovereign bordered territory, if you will, and then you would have expats, for lack of a better word, right?
Yeah, well, that's what I envision here. It's just like we play by the rules, set up. Get a bit of land and then call it a country, establish some permanent population, and then we just have 99% of our population lives overseas. That's the way the world is at the moment.
Yeah.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, please.
I've actually studied this at university, but I'm on a break at the moment. I studied this quite deeply, and I wanted to know the laws in place within the USA. And I found that they need to change a couple of laws. I won't go into it now, but I've got the papers here. It's easily done through the nation state, through Congress, but they choose not to do it, so it's share buybacks, things like
Are you
that.
saying the United States?
Yeah, the US.
Yeah.
And then you've also got the WTO, UN, IMF. They're controlled by obviously vested interests. Then you've got the issue with who caused climate change in the first place. I don't think initially it's a global issue. I actually think it's a corporate issue.
Which
So
is a global
the top 20 corporations that created
But they're
this.
multinational
Yes, but they're liable to clean up their own mess.
We have enabled them.
We've enabled them, yes.
Yeah. Like,
But
companies
there's also
operate-
intergenerational justice laws that you could create, I guess, in the pathway to re-establish justice
Yeah.
for the environment and for the many. But you've also got wealth, inequalities, this, that, and the other. How can you redistribute that over a generation? That can be done through different programs, through social robotics, or there's very ways to do that peacefully. But it all needs to be concurrent, and it all goes through ebbs and waves, and it all happens via convergence and divergence, and can stagnate. But the main thing is you include the local population, you include the regional, state, federal, cross-pollinate transcontinentally and globally, and it will work.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one from the
It's not
smallest.
impossible, it's doable.
Yeah. I agree.
Thank you for the great talk. Did I understand it right that global country doesn't imply any centralized government and everything is going to be locally governed in local neighborhoods?
Governance is an interesting question and one that I think is ever explored. I think, so when I was talking about local action, initially, you can think of this as like a stepping stone, like the first step towards the world that we need. And in terms of the local action, I don't see it being, I see it happening in concert with the countries. So let's say we're here in Sydney, we set up a little citizen gathering here and start taking local action that we can take. We do so operating within the existing, working with local members or with the country, with the politicians here, as much as they'd like to interact with us. In terms of how decisions would be made locally, I think that's to be explored. It makes sense that there'd be some form of democratic voting system at the local level, but I'm not too sure. Like that's something that I think we all need to figure out.
They've talked about people committees, and they're chosen via
Like get like a draw like
rotation. Yeah, something like that.
yeah.
And
I think initially that wouldn't work because, well, it would work if we had a sufficient population of global citizens living in an area. Like if there's like 40 of us, it probably wouldn't work so well. But if there's a population of 10,000, yeah, I think something like this actually requires some.
AI, AGI, ASI as a framework. I've
Yeah.
thought about it.
One day, but right now probably not. We just need we need like good, well thought out frameworks that have been designed by experts and that can be implemented locally.
Just one more idea, I have to say. Talk about human rights as a want. It's actually will become, in terms of evolutionary cycle, it becomes a need. So it's part of the, what do you call it? Technological general framework of systems. So it's reflective of the organic sphere. So to me, that's kind of natural. So does that make sense?
Yeah, what I think we've done is just we've taken like things that people need, and we're like, oh well, we'll call this a human right because we think it to be necessary to live a dignified life, and they evolve because we evolve.
Yeah,
Like the cultural layer. Sorry.
In 200 years, it will be a need to me.
But there are needs. I need the internet.
Yeah, but we only,
If I don't have the
so
internet,
I'll rephrase that. We'll be
how would we
mechanical.
get here?
We'll take it for granted. We'll
Yeah.
get in society already.
Oh.
We would have become something more.
Yeah.
But
Transcend.
then
Yeah.
the actual business connections within the internet would need to be provided by a nation state,
So
which is not like, if you're Trump, you have to pay to get onto the internet.
Yeah, but if it's a business would just be a policy. It's like a vanishing point. As long as it meets its objective, then it disintegrates. Then your evolution occurs again and it happens again.
No, I mean,
So I didn't get where you're coming from.
So the internet, as it is now, is a series of business connections. It's not water that comes from the earth. It's not,
It comes from the mind to me. It's organic.
like I get that, but people had to build it. People built the internet. Companies built the internet, and you don't get on the internet without a commercial relationship at some level. Now, if a nation state, say for example, this global citizenship nation, if they decide that they want to have a network, which it probably will need, definitely, then it would need to have its own or rent undersea cable. It would need wireless communication of some sort, obviously powered by undersea cable or satellites or whatever they're setting up in space, right? But all of that is a commercial relationship. So
yeah, I understand that, but from all the papers that I've read, those technologies were funded by the public, hence it's been stolen by the public, so it should return to the global commons. So that segregation of business to commercialisation is society. I think we need to reevaluate that instead of overlapping.
how was the internet funded by
I'll
the
wait
global
until
commons? No, I mean, because it started up. Yeah, but it started up as it started by the army, then it went to education, then and then it evolves over time with lots of money. So that's not something that you can just. I get it, but just the reality of where we are right now is you would need to this. I'm not even saying that it couldn't be done. I'm just saying this global citizenship would have to have its own network. It would have its own physical connection itself.
Yeah.
Dude, if Bevan Slattery, which is a single dude from Australia, he built all these companies, but a lot of the undersea cable that's responsible for getting Australia online. So if he can do it, a nation state could do it.
Well, Elon Musk can do it. He started I mean, it's,
Yeah.
it's 24 satellites already up there.
Yeah.
And it's going to be how many more? About
4,000.
every fortnight.
Yeah, 4,000 hours.
But unfortunately, like, I think we need our own, we need national, like, so I don't know if you guys, a lot of countries that aren't as stable as Australia have restricted internet access to their populations, and they're doing that to stop protests or to just hide the documentation of human rights abuses, and we are at risk of that as well. We just live in a more stable place, but our country could deny us access if it really wanted to. It doesn't seem so likely right now, but that fact that potential is there, and if the stakes are high enough, it could be done in the interest of national security. So because of that, we need internet infrastructure that can't be taken down, and mesh networks are one way. I mean, we can put satellites up there; they can get shot down. So this is something that's there to be explored. But it's a pernicious problem because of the importance. Like, the world is based on the internet, and if we get rid of that, we suddenly lose the ability to do things. And like, most cities only have enough food for about 3 days, and all food logistics are based on the internet. So you take that out, suddenly we are in dire straits. So we need something to fill that gap.
So I was wondering, have you heard of this model called spiral?
Spiral dynamics.
Yes.
It rings a bell.
Yeah.
Can you?
Yeah? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. Okay, great. So basically, the way, well, there's talks that currently the reason we have so many different problems is because of the conflict of value system in each layers. And we need a solution that is in a yellow solution or higher, or a tier 2 solution to bring.
What does that mean? I don't understand what a tier 2 solution is.
So basically, I'm probably not the best person to explain it. But in a nutshell, spiral dynamic, it works sort of like Maslow's chart of hierarchy of needs. So when you go through each level, you develop a higher level of needs. So right now, what we're seeing, there's conflict of cultures and needs between each levels. And tier 2 is at a stage where they can see all the needs and all the conflicts, and it's laid out. So it is quite interesting what you're proposing right now. That sounds to me almost like this tier 2 solution, at least the framework or the basis for something that can be built in that sphere. Because right now, like, green would be something like democracy, but green is the highest tier of highest level of tier 1, and that still has problems, like having Trump voted in, stuff like that. So
Trump wasn't voted by green.
I know, but the very fun, the structure of green allows blue or the other value system to take over. But it's really, I just think it's really interesting to look into and to see,
Yeah, check it out. Spiral dynamics.
Yes, spiral dynamics.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept actually that it's been running on Earth ever since. You can look at history and see the changes in humanity over the centuries, and how things got where the values changed in organizations, in countries, and individuals. And you can actually see the regression of the United States when they were attacked during 9/11 from what they were, an orange-green country, which means loving for nature as well as entrepreneurial, to regress to blue-orange, which is more the entrepreneurial still is. But
So
the
to
fear of
understand, it's like values are like which values we have dictate where we fit into this schema, like the green or blue or
your innermost values is
Dictate
your
everything.
unconscious decision making,
Yeah.
whether you're an organization or a person.
Yeah.
Hello.
That sounds very.
Anna, spiral dynamics is very interesting, and the problem is each country and each people are at different levels, so to get everyone on the same level is difficult. But my question for you is, are you aware of any other people countries or through the internet that people trying to do what are you proposing, kind of?
Yeah, there's Democracy Earth they're based in Argentina. They're working on the technical side, on developing identity systems and voting systems. There's BitNation, which is working on the country creation side, but I think a lot of these are lacking the social movement side of things and the narrative that weaves them all together. Particularly just taking like action against things like climate change and biosphere collapse, and recognizing like the humanitarian element, where like physically recognizing everyone, whoever wishes to be included as fellow citizens, and then the implications of that. However, like I'd love to, if there's anything out there that's underway that you're familiar with, I'd love to find out. Because I think we all like, there's a shitload of people out there who are thinking in similar ways, and we kind of just need to come together and just pool our resources, because we have a lot of money like in our pockets globally that we can put towards things like this.
Sorry, just one more question.
Yeah.
What is the main problem you're trying to solve with getting everyone together to create that? What would be the
Existential threats,
Yes.
just like survival, full stop. At the moment, we are the only glint of life in the entire cosmos, and like climate change can be fixed in a couple thousand years, right? Biodiversity takes millions and millions and millions of years to recover. Now, nature is a problem-solving machine. Like evolution is a problem-solving machine. Where do all our innovations come from? Like Velcro. You guys know Velcro? That came from, we looked at lizards and like, how do lizards stick to the wall? Holy shit, they've got little hairs. And we invented Velcro. Like all these like medicines, everything, like a lot of what we've learned is just because we mimicked nature, we looked at nature. And like, unfortunately, like, up until now, especially in recent years, we've had this very anthropocentric view of what's important. It's like human beings are like above nature. We transcend nature. We are not like, you know, smart apes that are somewhat hairless. We are above the natural system, which is complete bunkum. We are just one branch on the tree of life, and we are inextricably connected to the biosphere. And the sooner we realize that and embed that within our socio-political systems, the better. Because like people talk about like, oh, it's not financially viable or whatever. It's like, that's because we haven't quantified it. And like, we don't have carbon credits. We don't have like, how, like, if the Amazonian rainforest, like I mentioned the amount of innovations that nature generates, right? We cannot place a financial figure on the potential value of solutions that nature is producing, because it's just unknown. It's exorbitant. It's priceless. So we need to get over this anthropocentric view, because like, sure, we are conscious. It seems like a lot of other animals are conscious, and just because we have opposable thumbs and the ability to manipulate and abstract information, just because we have the power doesn't make us better. So the sooner we integrate that into our global ethics, which doesn't exist, the better. So yeah, existential threat. I don't want to do this. I'd rather do other stuff. Like, the world's going to shit.
How does the concept of global country solve the environmental problems if it accepts the existence of other countries who may be still responsible, and it would just be one of the few responsible countries in the world of irresponsible countries who would continue to pollute the atmosphere and land?
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is we live in, like, there are global problems, but one nation, one local body of people can act in a way that can bring about devastating global consequences. Is that what you're saying? So like, even if everyone did what we needed them to do, if the likes of China or the US or even just a small country, if they just dropped a couple of nukes, we would all suffer. How do we tackle that problem? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great question, and we do not have an answer to that. Nick Bostrom at the Future of Humanity Institute wrote a paper recently, and I can't remember exactly what the title is, but he talks about moral justification for basically a global surveillance state. That's like, because a small group of people can develop biotechnologies like bioweapons, or they can develop weapons that could potentially wipe out all life or all human life or whatever, like because the consequences are so large, something like a totalitarian state can be justified, that really rubs me the wrong way. As I'm sure it does for most people. I have no idea, but I guess we'll come. If that's our problem, that's not bad because it means we've solved a lot of others. But
I think
yeah.
it will be a totalitarian state who can ensure that it doesn't turn into some crazy government that doesn't care about the environment and the earth at all.
Yeah.
That's where they are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not sure.
Yeah.
I just want to hark back to some earlier question about doing many things at once. We only have limited resources, and some things have deadlines, and others don't, right? So fixing up the biosphere before it goes to pop is probably our first priority. We need to make sure we put that, we don't, devote resources to other things that might slow down our attendance to that one. So, we want justice and everything as well, but we have to be aware that, if we focus too much on justice or whatever else, we might end up, destroying our home. So that's just the point I wanted to make.
Yeah. It's a sad realization in a way that we have limited resources and we can't save everyone or everything. I mean, that's like the case with most, we need to save this type of polar bear or whatever. I love polar bears, but we need triage.
On the topic of defense, one of the largest threats to humanity might be asteroids. We have them the size of a common house brick to say the size of lunar Earth's moon, and it's just a matter of time, like 2 cars waiting to collide on the streets. And instead of just relying on humans, are we able in our nation to tap into our animal kingdom and say, my kitten has better reflexes than anyone in this room? If we were to make an interface where she could swat asteroids, could we make her a commander?
Commander Kitty?
Yes,
Commander
I'm
Kitty.
serious.
She was
Her
first.
reflexes, if we could tap into
We can
say,
train her.
yes.
She needs to be like pure black kitty though, like
Yeah.
Require proof of concept.
Well, thank you very much for your talk and for your passion and aiming for a global change. That says a lot about you. And you said that developing a new country won't be the biggest challenge that the global citizens will face. So my question is, which challenges do you think will be the biggest ones that global citizens will face? So summarize them.
The dissolution of the nation state of China, Russia, the US, they have lots of money and incredible technologies, and they wish to exist. They don't want to see power. One of the reasons why nuclear weapons weren't removed was because the US was just no, we're not going to get rid of these until everyone else agrees. So let's do something like that. So the fact is that it's this terrible game theoretic thing where we can't be sure that everyone else is going to at the nation level, we can't be sure that everyone is going to cooperate. So that we defect and build up our arsenals and all that, just so that if everyone else doesn't cooperate, we can beat them. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, nation states want to exist in perpetuity. It's like the company. You don't want your company to be destroyed. So it's a matter of, I think the tough part would be, the way that I could see it happening is if a sufficient number of people in those countries became global citizens. If 50% of the US is we're global citizens, then I could see that happening. But I think it's really trying to
have war before that.
Yeah, well that's the problem.
If you can see right now, for example, in a lot of places all over the world, there's general unease and people are not happy because there is a percentage point where the populace gets unruly. Hard to report with that, but and they can't be controlled by the nation state, and then it's if Texas wants to secede, no one can do anything about that, really, because they have all the guns. But if California wanted to secede, well then
they have all the technology.
They have all the
well,
money.
yeah, but they have, but they don't have, like they're not great at wanting to kill other people, right? They might want to attack and be manipulative, but Mean Girls doesn't work if you have guns. So this is what I mean, like that nation state, like I feel like it's almost like you want the Illuminati but for good. Is that like
Public Illuminati.
sure? I'm saying for good.
Yeah. But also
As in,
not
like,
secret, without a triangle. We got a different symbol.
I'm saying like in the way that like there is a lot of global small pockets of people who believe the same thing and believe in a cause that's greater than themselves, and that's great, and they do a lot of good locally, and at some point it gets corrupt because people suck, but at the end of the day they all they organize themselves into like a local group of people that have a natural leader and those leaders all hang out, and then it becomes it's a natural way that people organize themselves. You know, and so that naturally happens. It's just that you're trying to go global populace. I've thought the same thing a lot of times when I'm standing in a passport line. So I'm like, fuck this. I travel so much. It's not like I'm not bringing anything bad to your country. Just give me a passport that I can go anywhere with. I'm not going to abuse it. Just trust
There's
me.
some people coming into other countries. Like when you we're very
For
fortunate.
sure.
Maybe think about
100%.
those who just can't get it. I lived in Malaysia, grew up there, and I went to an international school, so I've got friends from all over the place, and a lot of my friends just can't get into other countries, or they get stopped at the border, and they migrated to Canada so that they can just be, so they just.
That is a very privileged problem to have. It's not like it's more like I have those thoughts where I'm like, it's 2019. How do we not have something that supersedes these stupid, boring land things? You know? I get it. I'm just like, there is a model for this. It's not a super reinvention of the wheel. So in that, and that is awesome because you know the problems that are going to happen. You can kind of predict that if enough of the population physically in one state have an issue, then the rest of the people have to go and help them get out or establish a landmass or something. Does that make sense?
Okay, no, I was just going to comment that I think the only thing we can hope for is a global, sudden existential threat where you have to actually go work together to be able to solve it, and that is what could unite us. But it's horrible.
See, we have that. It's just so abstract.
No, but that's too slow. It's weird, like the frog in hot water, waiting for it to boil.
What we need is a Martian colony to challenge outright the
Just
solar
manufacture the
dominance.
alien invasion, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Just that's
No, that's
CGI.
They might say it.
Can I just add to that? Structurally, the problem was, and it does go back 2.5 years. I have faith in humanity that we've got the knowledge to do it. And I actually cried when I first read this, when someone from Alexandria developed a prototype for a steam engine 2,000 years ago. And it was lost. So much technology was lost. Anyway, my point is, 2,500 years of political realist theory. Yeah, I know, it goes, I know that, but I don't want to freak anyone out. But my point is, 16th century, Westphalia, development nation state, the issue was the patriarchal system entrenched the superior-inferior relationship of the social contract. So that kept the war machine going, and it still goes to this day. So the way the financial system is structured is that everyone lends money to the US, I think if I read correctly, and the US is supposed to be like a global police state, but actually they're just a nation state, just invading different countries around the world via their multinational corporations, which are nationally embedded. So they control about 42 to 45%, sorry, it's a bit of approximation, of multinationals around the world. That's why I don't like using the word globalisation, because it's actually not in fruition yet. If it was true globalisation, I would see, 195 states, thereabouts, developing or developed. We are as strong as our weakest link, and we have let humanity down thus far. So I think we can do a lot better. But I just wanted to bring about.
The question is who's we, right? Because up until now it hasn't.
Okay, so this is leading into something that someone approached me on Facebook, because I've been an avid kind of transhumanist on and off for years. I got invited to be part of something for nothing, and I've been doing sort of feeding homeless for the last couple of years. And this guy from Africa came up to me and said, "I should be part of this NGO that was developed in the US." And I said, "Yeah, and what's their goal?" And I was so attracted to it, like I felt it intrinsically. We're so underutilised in terms of knowledge, in terms of the whole world. Their goal is to educate 3 billion people. I just think we can do it.
Yeah, give them internet access and Khan Academy, and boom.
But I'm already collaborating with people from India, Africa.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like with internet access, like you can learn anything, and like someone in the most remote area with a good enough internet connection and some good hardware can learn skills which could make them a shit ton of money.
So that's what I don't like. It's archaic, and it's linked back to intrinsic. Sorry, it's a bit
What's
complex.
archaic? I don't
So
understand.
you're talking about putting your spirit or putting your consciousness onto a computer.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this.
I think about that sometimes.
Yeah,
But
but
in terms
we're a
of-
long way from that. Like biology is complex. We're not going to just upload ourselves,
If
unfortunately.
you want to be. But if you backtrack a bit, if you take away the old ideology that's linked back to the patriarchal framework, profit maximisation, hoarding of wealth, military build-up, self-interest only, threats, domination, and you replace that with what they wanted to replace it with now of collaboration, cooperation, innovation, sharing, open access. I think we're there. It's just a matter of changing the paradigm. So profit maximisation is out of the equation now for me in terms of evolution. It would only be applied to the application of the development of new technologies. And still, it would have to be within a framework that what you would call an economic,
I
democratic
think like
framework.
people are really angry about businesses. Like I don't think profit maximization is a bad thing.
No,
As
no,
long as
no,
like
no,
you don't
I'm
take
not.
that profit and then
I'm not against
profit's
it.
good.
I'm
It's
about
value.
free market. I'm about
Yeah.
It's about policy mixes for different
Exactly. It's about serving.
areas applied to their developmental progress.
Yeah.
Because not one size fits all, like I've read before. You know?
Yeah.
But there's also, business has to look at the idea of medical blindness as well. Government is needed to a point, and it's going to be needed in the 21st century. Read a book from David Wood. It's a really good book to read. Highly recommend it. It's about inclusivity,
One last comment.
Well, sorry I was late, but it was an interesting discussion. And I think we're really in a world where we're at the juncture. I'm glad that you're challenging the Westphalian Treaty framework, because I think that's one very crucial juncture. It's called the Jus Regalia doctrine, where the state actually gives us the power to own natural resources. And if no one owns it, automatically the state owns it. There's another framework, a legal framework, and it happened even before Westphalia. It's a Spanish papal bull that divided the world between Spain and Portugal. Use of prop is the other principle, where we are allowed, through mutual respect, to use property that is not ours. Nature really isn't ours. If you believe in God, it's God's. But if you don't, it belongs to the succeeding generations, which are either depriving or paying interest to.
Not even the generations. It belongs to no one.
Yeah.
No entity.
Right. But we don't own it, in other words. But we also we are allowed to profit from it by applying our labor and generating savings, which we call investments. But we're also obliged not to destroy or harm it, destroy or damage it. We're obliged, if possible, to improve it like a Boy Scout. And we are also obliged not to cause harm to anyone by our use of it or excluding others from it. And I think if we go towards the direction of use of profit rather than use regalia, which I think leads to so many problems, which leads to nation state, and not only nation state, even the fictional personality of corporations, where corporations right now have more rights than human beings than is true. We've got to challenge it, because if we don't, we're headed towards what people are talking about, the totalitarian state, where either the nation state or the corporations that rule it rule our lives.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause for Sam. Continue on with the discussions here. Chauncey might want to give a talk later on as well, but stick around with some drinks at the back, and we'll actually talk
If you're
about
keen on keeping up to date with whatever developments transpire, the links.
Okay. That's right. Some good ideas for Internet 3.0 as well. Sure.
How are you doing? Sean, no worries. I'm good. How's your trip overseas?
Yes.
That was very interesting.
Did you make it there?
It's interesting that there's somebody that knows about it. Let me just quickly.
Yeah.